Good morning, UUFLB. This is Karen Marcus. I'll be your lay leader for today's service. Hopefully you can all see me. Give me a thumbs up, Gil, out there if you can. Great. All right. It's great to be with you once again for this, our penultimate service for the year. And before you run off to get your dictionary to look that up, that means next to last. And it's a special service for lots of different reasons. If not, the most important is that immediately after the service, we'll be having our annual meeting. So you want to make sure you stick around for that for a few extra minutes. So our coffee hour will be very abbreviated. The other thing I want to remind you of is the fact that next week after the service, we'll be having our picnic out at Core Creek Park. So make sure you have the details for that and get it on your calendar and pray for good weather. It'll be great to be with you all that day. So my last little reminder is that you put yourself in a speaker view so that you can enjoy the experience of the service in the best possible way. So, welcome. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you to our Zoom cyberspace. We know you come from different places, religions, beliefs, and backgrounds. And here at UUFLB, we hope you find comfort, connection, challenge, inspiration, and love. We're so glad you joined us this morning, and we hope you'll stay for a few minutes after for that brief period of fellowship and conversation and the all-important annual meeting. We continue with our monthly touchstone theme of courage for the month of May. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Courage is the power of the mind to overcome fear." Courage is essential to wield power nonviolently in opposition to all that diminishes or negates life. And courage makes repair of the world possible. Courage is doing the right thing, even in the face of those who tell us that we are crazy. It's taking a stand and living with it. Courage is also about growth, about a willingness to change one's mind, if and when that's the right thing to do. A brave person may fight when called upon, but a courageous person may choose to not fight, even if it means certain death. A spiritual value, courage is something to hope for and pray for, as it is necessary for a meaningful life. We're joined again today by the Reverend Dr. Neal Jones. We've had the pleasure of his company several times during our church year, and it's been a real blessing. You'll remember that he's a psychologist at the Pisgah Institute of Asheville. Born and raised in North Carolina, he earned his bachelor's from Wake Forest University, his master's in divinity from Southeastern Seminary, and his doctorate in psychology from Baylor University. He served as a minister of 5 different congregations in the North and South Carolina areas, as well as Texas and Pennsylvania, most recently at the Mainline Unitarian Church near Philly. And we were talking about some of our joint connections from there just as we were preparing for service. He also serves as the chair of the National Board of Trustees of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Reverend Dr. Jones teaches and practices a spirituality of personal wholeness, relational respect, and social justice. The title of his message today is Letting Life Be Your Teacher. If we dare to show up for our lives fully and wholeheartedly, change is inevitable because our experiences of life are ever-changing. Now, let us enter into worship together. Avi has prepared a contemporary song by Sting for our opening music interlude.
Good morning. We start today with some words of wisdom from Sting. Let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul troubles take to mounting, when the map you have leads you to doubt, when there's no information and the compass you have leads nowhere you know well, let your soul be your pilot, let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. When the doctors fail to heal you, when no medicine chest can make you feel well, when no counsel leads to comfort, when there are no more lies that they can tell, no more useless information, and the compass spins between heaven and hell, let your soul be your pilot, let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well. Let your pain be my sorrow, let your tears be my tears too, let your courage be my motto, that the north you find will always be true, when there's no information and the compass turns to nowhere you know well, let your soul be your pilot, let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well, let your soul be your pilot, let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well, let your soul be your pilot, let your soul guide you, it'll guide you well.
Oh, we continue to be blessed by not only Avi's talent in music and performance, but also by his ability to pick such wonderful songs to open our services. And I'm going to think about that song every time I have to tell myself that, I have to go with my gut. So now let us light our chalice. And read with me these words. May this flame, a symbol of transformation, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us. Our opening words are from the Reverend Lynn Cox. Listen to these. Come, you accidental pilgrims, you who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who emerge into this place as an act of liberation. Come, you who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, rusty hearts, hearts broken open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage, and you who have more courage than you realize. Come, you who stand behind the curtain, gathering up the resources to claim your truth. Come, you who have been in a bubble, you who are poised for transformation. We begin our story again, gathering courage, love, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose. We share a covenant, a direction for our shared journey, and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another to spiritual growth. And now we'll have a message for all ages.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Beck Stow, and our message for all ages this morning is When You Are Brave by Pat Zitlow Miller and illustrated by Eliza Wheeler. Some days, when everything around you seems scary, you have to be brave. Brave as a bird that steps from its nest, hoping to soar through the sky. Brave as a dog that wanders for miles, searching for one well-known light. Brave as a caterpillar that builds a bed, wondering when it will wake, because some days are full of things you'd rather not do. Like plunging into a pool all by yourself, hoping you'll swim and not sink, or standing alone in front of a crowd, searching for one friendly face, or boarding the bus and riding to school, wondering what lies ahead. At times like these, the world can seem too big, too loud, too hard, too much. While you feel too small, too quiet, too tired, not enough. On those days, look deep inside to find the courage you need. It might be hidden away, but if you close your eyes and breathe, you will see it, shining its light in the dark, warm, steady, safe. Your light might be small to start, just a spark, but you can turn it into a flame. Picture it in your mind. Then imagine it becoming bigger and bolder. You can make your courage so big it brightens your heart, fills your fingers, and flows to your toes. Think about what you're good at, something you love, or someone who loves you. No one else will see it, but you'll know you glow, and you'll know you are ready. No matter how deep the water, how loud the crowd, how hard the ride, or how much there is to do. You might struggle, you might succeed. People might clap, or laugh, or not notice at all. No matter what happens, you'll be all right. Because once you find your courage, it's easy to use again and again. The next time life seems scary or you start something new, you can remember when you were brave, and then you can stand straight and walk tall, knowing you are as brave as a bird, a dog, and a caterpillar, as brave as you. Make your courage so big, it brightens your heart, fills your fingers, and flows to your toes.
Wow. Oops. I don't think I needed to do that. One moment. Apologies. I always enjoy our message for all ages, and in particular that one. May we all be blessed with a memory of the times we have been courageous, and let that carry us into our next courageous act. And now Avi has prepared a musical interlude that's a familiar song. Let's listen to him perform Que Sera, Sera.
When I was just a little boy, I asked my mother, what will I I be handsome? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. Que sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, what will be, will be. Then I grew up and fell in love. I asked my lover what lies ahead. Will we have rainbows day after day? Here's what my sweetheart said. Que sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, what will be, will be. Now I have children of my own. They ask their father, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? I tell them faithfully. Que sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, que sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, what will be, will be. What will be, will be. Que sera,
That was great. I wish I could have seen everybody because I'm sure you were all swaying with the music, if not singing along. And now it's my pleasure to invite Reverend Jones to give us a reading for our service.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you, UUs of Lower Bucks, for having me back as your guest. I always enjoy being with you. And our reading this morning goes very well, Avi, with your song and with our story for all ages. Our reading comes from John Kabat-Zinn, which I will read, and then we'll follow with a few moments of silence that I will end with Amen. John Kabat-Zinn writes, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Waves are unstoppable. They are a force of nature. They may change heights and intensity, but they still come. You can brace against them, but they are as unstoppable as anything on this earth. However, while we cannot stop them, we can learn to tame and even enjoy them. It doesn't make the waves any less smaller or less dangerous, but it does make them less scary and perhaps even a lot more fun. What are our other options? We can fight them, but to what effect and to what end? We can ignore them, but only to our own peril and loss of opportunity. Or we can learn to surf, to ride the waves, to harness them for our own benefit and enjoyment. That sounds like a lot more fun to me." Let's take a few moments of silence to reflect on these words. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Jones. You know, I think sometimes Providence actually serves up something to teach us the lesson. So as Sherry and Gil know, I had some technical problems over the last 24 hours that have had me really anxious about how well this service would go. So I'm going to learn to ride that wave and enjoy it. At this time, let's pause in our service and show our gratitude by sharing our gifts. As you know, for the last couple of months, we've been supporting the relief efforts in Ukraine through Save the Children. More than 5.5 million people have now fled the violence of Ukraine, the majority of which are women and children. And Save the Children is concerned about the kids that are caught in the middle of armed conflict and forced from their homes in varying degrees of temperatures and being the potentially exposed to injury, hunger, and cold. So our contributions and donations to Save the Children's Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund helped provide immediate aid in the form of food, water, hygiene kits, psychosocial support, and cash assistance. So please be a part of this effort by contributing as generously as possible to help in the humanitarian effort and protect children in crisis. And we thank you for your generosity. And now it's my pleasure to turn back to Dr. Jones for our sermon message.
Thank you, Karen. Debbie, and that is not her real name, Debbie, a counseling client of mine at another time and place, was having a hard time with the relationships of her life because she assumed off the bat that people would not like her. Now, when she shared with me her life story, it was easy to understand why she felt this way. Her father had been a workaholic who practically abandoned Debbie and her mother while pursuing his career. Left alone, her mother felt lonely and depressed, and she turned to alcohol to medicate her depression. As a result, neither parent spent much time with Debbie or was emotionally available to her. As a child, Debbie thought as a child would. She concluded from her parents' neglect that they didn't like her. And if her parents didn't like her, it must be because she was not very likable. Why wouldn't she come to that conclusion? Her parents knew her better than anyone. And from a child's vantage point, parents know everything. Debbie took the conclusion she made in childhood with her into adulthood, which is typically what we all do. Throughout her life, Debbie met various people, some who liked her, some who did not. Those who did not seem to like her confirmed her assumption that she was not likable. Now, you would think that meeting people who liked her, however, would invalidate her assumption. But that's not how assumptions work. Typically, we don't change our assumptions to fit the facts. We change the facts to fit our assumptions. We tend to do this in our politics as well as our personal lives. So when Debbie encountered people who seemed to like her, she assumed that they were merely being polite and pretending to like her, or they just didn't know her well enough yet. And in time, as they got to know her, they would dislike her. This is how the past colors the present. Or as William Faulkner put it, the past is not dead. It's not even past. Now, Debbie's assumptions exerted power over her actions. Since she anticipated that people would not like her, she would not be very likable. She would be withdrawn and not engage in conversation with people. Or she would even act snarky on occasion. And sure enough, both behaviors influence others not to like her very much. In other words, Debbie was creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is something else we all typically do. She came to see a counselor because she wanted to change. Now, there are basically two approaches to change. One way is trying harder. This approach is about change from the outside in. You change how you behave, or you change your external circumstances in order to change who you are internally. This approach takes action. It formulates a step-by-step plan with clear goals and then exerts willpower to reach those goals. This is the all-American way to try to change, and some people assume that it's the only way. Debbie tried this approach before visiting me. She bought a book of daily affirmations, such as, "I'm a good, decent, likable person." And she practiced saying this to herself in front of her mirror each day. She became more intentional about smiling when talking to people. And she tried to be more positive and upbeat. Despite her best efforts, however, nothing seemed to work. Debbie just could not make herself believe that other people could possibly like her. Now, trying harder is not the only way to change. Another way is not trying so hard. This approach is about change from the inside out, changing the way you perceive, think, or feel in order to change how you behave. This approach is not so much about doing as being. It's about acceptance, especially self-acceptance. And as Carl Rogers observed, the more thoroughly we accept ourselves, the more change seems to happen unnoticed. Now, I have a very sophisticated way of determining which way is better. And here it is. If what you're doing ain't working, do something different. Now, since Debbie had been trying so hard to change to no avail, it made sense to me that perhaps we shouldn't try so hard. So we just sat and talked. I listened as she told me about her childhood, in particular about the hurt and neglect and loneliness she felt in light of her parents' neglect. Since they had provided for all of her material needs, she had assumed that they were also providing her emotional needs, which they had not. We looked at how their lack of warmth and nurture had led her to believe that she was not likable. And for the first time, she became aware that she had chosen to believe this assumption as a child and that she was still believing it as an adult. I listened intently as she recounted the many disappointments she had had in her relationships and how frustrated and helpless she felt that things could be different. I asked her periodically to share how she was feeling about our therapy relationship. And usually she would say that I was being nice because I was being paid to be nice. And I would always remind her that she was paying for my time, but that you could not pay someone to like you. Over time, she started to believe that her therapist did like her. And more importantly, she started to experience herself as a likable person. Over time, she became less likely to assume that other people would not like her. She began giving others the benefit of the doubt. She didn't feel as guarded around others, and others did not feel put off by her. She became more comfortable with the idea of people liking her and with the feeling of being liked, a feeling that she had rarely let herself feel before. In time, she began to make friends. Debbie changed by not trying so hard to change. Now, one way to understand what happened with Debbie is to see that she did not allow herself to experience her life. Her assumption that she was unlikable was like a wall between herself and her experience that others could and did like her. She was stuck in living in her assumptions about life instead of living in her experiences of life. When she began to trust and embrace her experience, she began to change. Change always happens when we immerse ourselves in the experiences of our lives, because life is like a river, dynamic, flowing, always moving. In fact, the word experience comes from the Latin root per, which means forward or through. Now, sometimes the river of life takes a straight path. Sometimes it takes unexpected twists and turns. The river of life is sometimes like turbulent rapids or a slow meandering stream. Now, personally, I prefer the slow meandering streams to the turbulent rapids, but sometimes life doesn't give us a choice. Whatever is the case, life is always moving. And if we get into the flow of our experience, we too will move. Change happens through experience. Now, sometimes we don't immerse ourselves in our experience. We may skim along the surface of our lives by keeping ourselves so busy with endless activity, so distracted with endless demands that we never allow ourselves to be quiet and alone with ourselves. You can't get to know yourself unless you spend time with yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but it makes me feel really important when I open my calendar and see it filled with appointments and events. But when it's too full, that's not living. That's skimming the surface of life. You can't think deeply or feel deeply when you're frantically on the run. When I worked for an outpatient counseling center back in Columbia, South Carolina, I used to drive to Sumter one day a week to one of our satellite counseling centers. It was about an hour drive. Now, when I first started making those trips, I would whine and complain about the time I was wasting on the road. But then I realized that my time on the road was one of the few times during my week when I could be quiet and alone. Now, in the beginning, I felt uncomfortable because I wasn't sure what to do with myself. But eventually, I realized that I didn't have to do anything, just be. In time, I'll look forward to those many retreats from the busyness of my life. Or we may separate ourselves from our experience, like Debbie was doing, by putting up a wall of expectations and assumptions between ourselves and our experience. I remember driving a carload of kids to the North Carolina mountains for our summer youth trip at a previous church. One of the kids had never seen the mountains. And as we rounded the curve in the road and she caught her first vista of the mountains, she exclaimed, "Wow, awesome, look at that. That's beautiful. I've never seen anything like that before." I thought her reaction was adorable. Then we came to the next vista. "Wow, awesome, look at that. That's beautiful. I've never seen anything like that before." It was nice seeing her really appreciate nature's grandeur. And then the next vista, and the next same intense reaction, and the next one, and the next one. After a while, her excitement became annoying. I caught myself thinking, yeah, you've seen one mountain, you've seen them all. So here was two people. Here were two people viewing the same scene in two very different ways. She was opening herself up to the experience of the mountain's majesty, while I was closing myself off from my experience with my prejudice, Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I was assuming that there was nothing interesting to behold, so I lost my interest. I assumed that there was nothing to be gained from my experience, so I separated myself from my experience. I was living in my assumption, not in my experience. As a result, she was being changed, and I wasn't. Our preconceptions, expectations, judgments, and prejudices were all formed in the past, based on past experience. When we impose them on our present experience, they cut us off from the present flow of life, and we remain stagnant. Our preconceptions and expectations interrupt the flow. It's not supposed to be like this. It's too cold, warm, salty, bright, dark, cheap, or old. I'm not strong, clever, nice, diligent, or happy enough. But life doesn't fit our molds. And if we hold ourselves back and wait for life to meet our expectations, we will never truly live or change. We don't change when we don't immerse ourselves in our lives. Sometimes we skim along the surface of our lives with our busyness. Sometimes we separate ourselves from our lives with our assumptions. Sometimes we step out of the river of life and observe it from the riverbank. This is the intellectual approach to life. Not immersed in the flow of life, but reflecting on life from a safe distance, examining, analyzing, questioning, investigating, dissecting, contemplating, pontificating. You may recognize this as the Unitarian way. It's living in your head, but not in your life. It's being cut off from the neck down, from your body, your feelings, your imagination, your intuition, your relationships. It's understanding everything, but being passionately committed to nothing. It's flesh and blood turned into computer. Now, computers don't change their programs without input. When you remove yourself from the stream of life and observe it from the riverbank, never getting your feet muddy or your body wet, you don't change. One way of inviting change into your life is to embrace your life. Now, what does it mean to embrace your life? It means to practice what we were taught to do as children before we cross the street. Stop, look, and listen. It means paying attention to your experience, being fully present in the here and now. Much of the time we are here in body only, but our minds are somewhere else. We hear, but we don't listen. We look, but we don't see. A character in the movie Postcards from the Edge wrote a card that said, "Having a wonderful time. Wish I were here." Now, at various times in my life, I've gained too much weight, most recently during this pandemic. And at various times, I've taken the try harder approach to lose weight. I have forced myself to eat only certain foods and certain portions. And by sheer willpower, I have occasionally lost weight, usually only to gain it back and then some. Now, in recent years, however, I've tried to pay more attention to my experience of hunger and my experience of being satisfied. I know this doesn't sound like a radical approach, but for me it is, because I was taught as a kid to eat everything on my plate, because for some reason I didn't understand then, and I still don't understand, my eating everything on my plate prevented hunger in China. And it must have worked because I understand that China has alleviated hunger. When you're taught to eat everything on your plate, you learn to focus on your plate and ignore your own experience of eating. So what I try to do, not successfully all the time, but what I try to do now is to slow down and relish my experience of a meal. I try to take the time to notice the taste and texture of the food I'm eating and to pay attention to my body's sensation of being full. When I pay attention to my experience of eating, I find that I tend to eat smaller portions. And I find this fascinating. I tend to want to eat healthier foods. In this way, without trying harder, I've been able to keep my weight down. We invite change when we pay attention to our experience. We also invite change when we make room for all of our experience. Now, no one enjoys experiencing pain in their lives, but pain is as much a part of life as joy. In fact, I've come to the conclusion that the experience of pain may be necessary for the experience of joy because painful experiences enlarge our capacity to enjoy life. Take the experience of grief. Now, grief is a natural response of our body and psyche to loss. And the more significant the person or thing lost, the longer and more intense your grief. But the thing is that grief, like all emotions, does pass eventually if we make room for it and fully experience it. Now, some people think that they can short circuit their grief if they force themselves to ignore their sadness and force themselves to think and do only positive things. But you can't cheat grief. You may suppress it for a while, but it will express itself. People who try to short circuit their grief only end up prolonging it. If you want to heal from a loss, make room for your grief. Take the time to reminisce about the person. Look at old photos and videos. Listen to old music. Talk about them with friends and family who knew them. Let the tears flow. Don't hold back. Embrace your grief fully, and then you'll be better able to let it pass. We invite change when we make room for all of our experience. Sometimes trying harder leads to change, but sometimes our plans and actions can interfere with change. Sometimes our plans and actions can intrude upon the natural flow of our experience. When we immerse ourselves in the experiences of our life, even unpleasant, painful experiences, perhaps primarily unpleasant, painful experiences, we will change because life is like a river, dynamic, flowing, always moving. This approach to change is not about trying to control the flow of life. It's going with the flow, with your eyes and your mind and your heart wide open. It's not so much about doing as being. It's about acceptance, especially self-acceptance. It's letting life be your teacher. And for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, the lessons never end. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Jones. That was so inspirational. And I often think of that phrase, expectation can be the mother of all frustration. So thanks for the reminder, and also for the lesson that we should all stop, look, and listen to let life be our teacher. So at this moment, and with that inspiration in mind, let us pause to share the joys and sorrows of this fellowship. If you wish to share something today, it's best if you can go to your Zoom controls, click on reactions, and raise your electronic hand. It puts you at the top of our participant list so that we can quickly identify you and help you to unmute. If that's something that's hard for you to do, you can always wave your physical hand, and Sherry and Gil are out there helping to identify you. And for everyone's benefit, please be brief. So I think the first is Nancy.
Hi, I have a joy, and I wanted to share it. I see Lois out there. Lois, I'm going to call you out. She reached out to us and was just looking at new communities, and we are one of them. And I invited her to come, along with many of other people on our board who also reached out to Lois. And I just wanted to say, I'm glad you made it, and it's good to see you. I hope you enjoy what you see.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there anyone else who'd like to share?
I can't hear you.
Sorry. Thanks. I just wanted to acknowledge that for all the joys and sorrows that have been shared and those that are unspoken, let's take a moment to just pause for a moment of meditation and silent prayer. And now to close our service, Avi has prepared a familiar hymn. Sorry. My apologies. Here we go.
Please join me in all three verses of our closing hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store.
And now let's close our service with the extinguishing of the chalice. And read these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. That concludes our service. We'll continue in fellowship and also have our annual meeting.